My name is Barbara Schmitz. I'm 31 years old. The smell of antiseptic burned the back of my throat, sharp and chemical, fighting with the metallic taste of my own blood. I stared up into an army of fluorescent lights, each one buzzing faintly like a swarm of trapped insects. My left leg hung suspended in a sling, throbbing in its own stubborn rhythm. The pain in my leg was loud, but it wasn't the worst thing in the room. That night, lying in an ER cubicle with dried blood on my temple and gravel still stuck to my palms, I realized something that hurt a lot more than the accident. I realized I was alone, and not by mistake. I didn't remember the impact. One minute, I was crossing the street after work, scrolling through emails like an idiot, thinking about deadlines. The next, there were flashing red and blue lights, strangers shouting, "Ma'am, can you hear me?" and EMTs lifting me onto a stretcher. They said the driver never saw me. I wasn't sure if I believed them, but it didn't matter. I was alive, conscious, answering questions. Stable. Stable enough to reach for my phone. That was where the real damage happened. My fingers shook as I unlocked the screen, more from adrenaline than fear. There were a dozen names I could have tapped. Friends. My boyfriend, Daniel. He was probably asleep or on yet another late shift, and for a second I hovered over his contact. But this didn't feel like something I wanted him to swoop in and fix. This felt bigger, older. So I pressed Mom. It rang once, twice. On the third ring, the call connected, and I was greeted not by concern, but by irritation. "Barbara, it's late," she snapped over a roar of background noise. "What is it now?" I swallowed. I got hit by a car, Mom. I'm in the hospital." For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then I heard my dad's voice in the background, muffled and annoyed, and my older brother Mark shouting over both of them. "He's having a breakdown," my mom said, her voice already frayed. "They gave him a ticket for parking in the wrong spot, and he's hysterical. Can this not wait? I'm in the yard dealing with this." I stared at the IV taped to my arm. I was hit by a car," I repeated, as if maybe she hadn't heard me the first time. "Are you dying?" she asked. I blinked at the ceiling. "No." "Then don't be dramatic, Barbara. We'll talk tomorrow." The line went dead. No, I did. Nothing inside me exploded. There was no scream, no sob, no dramatic movie moment. Just a quiet, precise feeling, like a lock finally sliding into place after years of jiggling the key. I had always known, in a vague way, that Mark's chaos had its own gravity, and we were all forced to orbit around it. But hearing my mother essentially ask if I was dying to measure whether I was worth her time, that was the measurement. That was the answer. I lay there, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the flat, empty silence of a completed call. The nurse adjusted something by my bed, asked how my pain was. I mumbled, "Manageable," because it was. Physical pain always felt simpler to me. You could point to it, you could quantify it. This other thing, this heaviness in my chest, this cold spreading behind my ribs, that didn't have a chart. I'd been paying my own rent since I was 19. I had transferred money to Mark more times than I could count, covering his overdraft fees, his surprise flights out of town, his "I swear this is the last time" emergencies. In every family group text, I was the dependable one, the low-maintenance one, the one who never needed anything. Apparently, that meant I wasn't worth dropping a parking meltdown for. I stared at my cracked phone screen. My reflection stared back, warped and fragmented by the spiderweb pattern. Somehow, it felt accurate. I could have called Daniel. He would have come, no questions asked. I could hear him already, half-asleep voice snapping into panic. "Which hospital? I'm on my way." I could have called my friend Layla, who lived 20 minutes away and had told me, more than once, "If anything ever happens, you call me first, okay?" I didn't call either of them. I didn't want comfort. I wanted change. My thumb hovered over my contacts list, then moved down to a name I'd saved 2 years ago and rarely used. Rachel Morton, my lawyer. She picked up on the second ring, calm and alert, in a way my own mother had never managed. "Barbara," she said, "is everything all right?" "Physically, I think so," I answered. My voice sounded small but steady. Emotionally, not even close. There was a faint rustle on her end, like she was sitting up straighter. "Tell me what you need." I stared at the curtain drawn around my cubicle, at the faint outline of a doctor passing in the hallway. "I want to take them off everything," I said. "My parents, emergency contacts, financial backups, medical power of attorney, all of it. I want them out of every place where someone gets to say they're responsible for me." Rachel was quiet for a moment, not shocked, just considering. "Okay," she said finally. Her tone shifted into professional, precise, but there was warmth under it. I'll be there first thing in the morning. We'll go through all of it together. That's it? I asked, because part of me expected her to tell me I was overreacting. Dramatic, ungrateful. That's it, she replied. You've clearly thought about this. Years, I admitted. I just never believed it would actually come to this. It has, she said gently, and we'll handle it. After the call ended, I let my arm fall back onto the scratchy hospital blanket. There was a water stain in the corner of the ceiling tile above me. A faint brown ring, like an old coffee mug, had once been pressed against it. I focused on that circle until the buzzing in my ears faded. I wasn't angry the way I used to be. Not tight-lipped, not swallowing the hurt and waiting for the next round of excuses. This felt cleaner, colder. I wasn't waiting for them to realize what they'd done. I wasn't waiting for an apology. I was done performing. For so long, I told myself that being quiet, competent, and available was the same thing as being strong. But strength, I was starting to understand, had nothing to do with how much pain you could silently endure. Sometimes strength was a signature on a line that severed the last excuse anyone had to treat you like property. Rachel arrived the next morning in a navy blazer, flats that didn't make a sound, and an expression that said she was here to work, not to hover. She pulled a chair up to my bed, opened her laptop, and set a thick folder on the tray table. I brought everything we might need, she said. We'll start with medical power of attorney, emergency contacts, banking authorizations. We can adjust as we go. There was no pity in her voice. No, are you sure lecture. Just, we'll start. I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. Okay. She worked through each form with me, explaining in simple, sharp sentences what each document did, what each signature changed. The hospital staff floated in and out, checking vitals, adjusting machinery, but in that little square of space, it felt like Rachel and I were dismantling a house that had stood crooked my whole life. Do you want to assign anyone else as your primary? She asked at one point, glancing up over her screen. Power of attorney, emergency contact, all of that? Daniel's face flashed across my mind, his crooked smile, the way he always said, whatever you need, just tell me. Then my mother's voice crashed in after it. Are you dying? Then don't be dramatic. I shook my head. No, I said slowly. Not right now. I don't think there's anyone I trust with that yet. That's okay, Rachel said. Better to be alone by choice than surrounded by people who think they own you. A short, startled laugh escaped me. It wasn't that it was funny. She had just said it so cleanly that it knocked the air out of me. We kept going. With each name I crossed out, with each box I unchecked, it felt like scraping off labels I had never agreed to wear. Dutiful daughter, emergency backup, financial safety net. The pen moved steadily in my hand. I half expected to shake, to hesitate, to say, maybe we should wait. I didn't. By the time Rachel closed her laptop, my leg ached, my head pounded, and I felt lighter, not happy, not yet, but clear. I'll notify the hospital, your insurance, and your bank this afternoon, she said, stacking the signed forms into a neat pile. She slid a copy into a manila envelope and set it on the rolling table beside me. Within 24 hours, your parents will be out of every loop. This is yours now. The envelope looked heavier than it should have, like it was filled with bricks instead of paper. This isn't a reset, Barbara, she added softly. It's a boundary. There's a difference. I nodded because if I tried to speak, I wasn't sure what would come out. When they finally discharged me 2 days later, my leg locked in a brace and a dull ache humming under my skin, Rachel had already arranged a car to take me home. No flowers, no dramatic farewell, just logistics handled, like I was someone worth planning for. I clutched the envelope to my chest as the orderly wheeled me to the exit. Outside, the air felt sharper, like the world was somehow more in focus. Cars passed. People walked by, lost in their own problems. Somewhere, a siren wailed in the distance. I realized, as the driver helped me into the back seat, that my family had no idea what had just changed. They were still in their yard, circling Mark's latest disaster, convinced that I would always be the quiet satellite, ready to be pulled back into orbit. They had no idea I'd just cut the string. As the car pulled away from the hospital, I rested my hand on the manila envelope in my lap. This wasn't a declaration of war. It was a surrender. But I wasn't surrendering to them. I was surrendering to reality. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for anyone else to tell me it was okay. It simply was. My apartment felt unfamiliar the moment I stepped inside, as if I'd walked into a version of my life I'd been maintaining for someone else. The ride home had been quiet, just the low hum of tires on asphalt and the occasional hiss of brakes. The driver helped me to the elevator, then to my door, then left with a polite nod, leaving me standing on one crutch, staring into a home I suddenly realized had never truly felt like mine. The air inside was still, almost sterile, the way spaces feel when the person living in them has been performing instead of inhabiting. The couch cushions were perfectly arranged, the dining table spotless, the throw blanket folded into a crisp rectangle like I was waiting for a guest who never came. Or worse, one who had never existed. I took a few slow, uneven steps into the living room. Every shuffle of the crutch made the quiet louder. I really lived like this, I murmured to myself. My leg throbbed, but it wasn't anything compared to the pulsing awareness of how much of this apartment was shaped by expectation. My mother's voice telling me to keep things presentable, just in case. My dad reminding me to stay flexible. My brother Mark asking if he could crash here for a few days. That always turned into weeks. The guest towels in the hallway closet. The neutral art my mother said looked less chaotic. The stocked freezer for unexpected family drop-ins. They had never come, not once. Yet I had lived as though any day now they might. I lowered myself onto the bar stool at the kitchen counter and stared at my fridge. Not a single magnet, not one photo, not one trace of personality. Just a gray, cold rectangle, a blank surface. A lot like the way my family preferred me. Functional, unproblematic, easy to ignore. I exhaled, long and shaky. This was what a life built around other people's comfort looked like. Not mine. My phone buzzed, a text from Rachel. All entities have confirmed full restriction of access. You are now the sole decision maker on all medical and financial fronts. I read it twice, then a third time. It hit me harder than the accident. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the shock of being free. You are now the sole decision maker. It felt like hearing my own name spoken clearly for the first time, like someone had peeled the tape off my mouth after a lifetime of quiet compliance. I typed back, "Thank you. That sentence feels louder than anything they've said to me in months." A moment later, she replied, "Because it's yours." I set the phone down, my eyes stinging more than I wanted to admit. The apartment was too quiet, not in the lonely way, just honest. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the distant traffic several floors below, the soft rustle of my own breath. No voices demanding explanations, no footsteps pacing with chaos, no door slams, no shouting. Just me, and the hum of a life I hadn't started living yet. I scanned the room again. The perfectly arranged bookshelf, rows of novels I kept because they looked respectable, not because I cared about them. The framed family photo from a vacation when I'd spent the entire week pretending not to notice how everyone left me out of the plans. I stood, bracing on one leg, and limped over to the wall. I lifted the frame off its hook and stared at the picture. There I was, smiling with a face that wasn't mine. Eyes tight, posture stiff, the kind of smile that aches afterward. A smile for show. I set the frame on the floor. Next came the guest linens. I packed the neatly folded towels and spare sheets into a plastic bin marked donation. I didn't need a home prepared for people who had made it clear they wouldn't come. My phone buzzed again. A voicemail. The caller ID made my stomach tighten. "Mom." I hit play. "Barbara, we heard from your aunt that you were in the hospital. Why didn't you tell us? We're just shocked. Call us. We're worried." The rehearsed tone, the artificial softness, the way her voice quivered only on the parts she wanted to land hard. I deleted it. If she was worried, it wasn't about me. It was about losing access, losing control. An hour later came another voicemail, this one from my dad. "You've made your point. But this is excessive, Barbara. Your mother is upset. Mark is confused. And quite frankly, I am disappointed. We deserve some explanation." I didn't even listen to the whole thing. Delete. Then came a text from Mark. "Seriously, Barb? You're icing out Mom and Dad like they're enemies. Whatever happened to being the bigger person?" I let out an incredulous laugh. Not a happy one, just the kind that bursts out when something is too painfully predictable. Mark had always relied on me to be the bigger person, which always meant the quieter person, the compliant person, the person who absorbed damage without complaint. Not anymore. I put my phone face down. An hour passed. Maybe two. Time moved differently when you stopped bracing for the next emotional hit. The apartment felt too clean, too curated, like a museum exhibit labeled "Woman Who Doesn't Inconvenience Anyone." I reached into a drawer, pulled out a small box of trinkets, old birthday cards, ticket stubs, notes from college friends. I dug through them, letting memories blur until my fingers brushed something unexpected. A folded piece of paper, a letter addressed to future me, written when I was 17. I sat on the couch and opened it carefully. The page trembled slightly in my hands. One day, younger me had written in messy, hopeful handwriting, "I hope you stop trying so hard to be what everyone else needs you to be." My chest tightened. 17-year-old me had seen the truth long before adult me dared to. I set the letter gently on the coffee table, and for the first time since coming home, I felt something close to peace. Not comfort, not relief, peace. A quiet, firm awareness settling into my bones. I was not the same person who left this apartment 2 days ago. I wasn't waiting for my mother's approval. I wasn't waiting for my father's disappointment. I wasn't waiting for Mark's chaos to dictate my life. I was waiting for myself. And I had finally arrived. My phone buzzed again. This time, not a voicemail. A text from Daniel. "Hey, beautiful. Heard about the accident from Layla. Are you home? Can I come over?" A warmth tugged at my chest. Soft, but edged with complication. Daniel meant well. He always meant well. But he also came from a family where disagreements were fixed over dinner, where apologies flowed freely, where love wasn't conditional. He didn't understand the ecosystem I'd grown up in, the performance, the hierarchy, the silence. His next message arrived before I could reply. "You should talk to them, Barb. They're your parents. People panic. Families fight. Maybe this is all a misunderstanding?" I closed my eyes. There it was, the first small fracture. Not his fault, but real. I typed back slowly. "Not tonight. I need space, and please don't call them for me." He didn't respond for a few minutes. Then, "Okay, I'm here when you're ready." I exhaled, tension easing. At least he listened. At least he didn't push. I set the phone aside and looked around my apartment one more time. Then I said aloud to no one but myself, "I'm not rebuilding my life around them ever again." The words didn't echo. They sank into the walls like they had been waiting for years. The next morning, sunlight leaked through the blinds in thin, hesitant lines. I blinked awake slowly, the stiffness in my leg reminding me that the accident hadn't been a nightmare, and neither had the phone calls. My phone sat on the nightstand, dark and still. No new messages, no apologies, no concern. Just silence, and not the neutral kind, the kind loaded with expectation. My family had always used silence the way some people use raised voices. It was punishment, a withdrawal of warmth meant to make me move first. But this time I didn't. I sat up, wincing as my leg protested, then shuffled toward the kitchen. I made coffee, not the weak, watery kind my mom insisted was better for digestion, but the dark roast I actually liked. The aroma filled the apartment, richer than any moment I'd allowed myself in years. I took my mug to the couch and let myself sink in. The cushions felt different today, softer. Maybe because for the first time I wasn't sitting for anyone else. I was sitting for me. That's when the first text came. Not from my mother, not my father. My Aunt Clara. "Sweetheart, I don't know what's going on, but your mother is devastated. Please call her." Devastated, not worried, not concerned for my injury. Devastated, because I wasn't playing my role. I didn't answer. A second message came 10 minutes later from my cousin Nate. "Families fight, Barb, but freezing them out? That's harsh." I stared at the words for a long moment before locking my phone again. They all had the same script. I had simply stopped acting in it. By noon, the sun had warmed the apartment enough that I felt a rare spark of energy. I limped to the storage cabinet and pulled out a dusty box labeled "old stuff," things I hadn't touched in years. The lid resisted at first. It felt like it had fused to the cardboard, sealed by time and neglect. Inside were pieces of myself I'd forgotten. Sketchbooks from high school, half-finished drawings of rivers and hands and eyes. Doodles from days when I still believed creativity wasn't a weakness, when my mother hadn't scolded me for wasting time on things that won't earn you anything. I lifted a sketchbook and brushed off the dust. The charcoal smudges on the edges stained my fingertips like shadows. I flipped through, page after page, watching the younger version of myself emerge. Bold strokes, confident lines, a softness in shading that surprised me. I used to love drawing. I used to stay up late sketching tiny scenes from memories. Mark sleeping on the couch, Dad fixing the sink, Mom watering plants on the porch. Back then, the world hadn't yet told me to shrink. A wave of warmth washed through me, bittersweet. I grabbed a pencil from the drawer and sat at the coffee table. My hand hesitated over the page. Then it moved. Slow at first, then steadier. Not perfect, not clean. Just honest. It felt like waking up. By early afternoon, my phone buzzed again. Not a text, not a voicemail. A call. I frowned at the screen. Rachel Morton, I answered immediately. Hey. Her voice was low, steady. Barbara, I wanted to give you a heads up. I got a notification from hospital administration. My stomach tightened. What kind of notification? A pause. Not hesitation. Care. Your brother Mark called pretending to be you, she said. He tried to get access to your medical records. The room spun slightly. I gripped the edge of the coffee table. What? They flagged it immediately, Rachel continued. His answers didn't match your security protocols. They denied access and logged it as a privacy violation. Your information is still secure. A cold, hollow feeling spread down my spine. Mark, who I'd bailed out financially more times than any sibling ever should. Mark, whose crises I had soothed for years. Mark, who had sent me a text calling me dramatic for setting boundaries. He tried to impersonate me. Thank you for telling me, I whispered. You did everything right, Barbara, Rachel said softly. Because you set boundaries early, the system worked. These protections exist for a reason. Her words hit like a quiet, steady drumbeat. The system worked because I chose myself. We hung up after she confirmed a few additional security measures. I sat there in the calm that followed, breathing slowly, letting the reality settle. My own brother had tried to invade my privacy the moment access was denied. My family didn't want connection. They wanted control. Later that day, I decided to tackle another cabinet. I opened a drawer full of old keepsakes, cards, photos, scraps of my younger years. Near the bottom, I found something I didn't remember keeping. A framed photo. Me and Mark sitting on a trampoline, both of us beaming, maybe 9 and 12 years old. Sunlight streaked across our faces. Mark looked carefree. I looked happy. Genuinely happy. There was a sticky note on the frame. Don't forget who your real family is, Mom. My fingers tightened, not with anger, just clarity. I removed the sticky note and crumpled it. I kept the photo, not for nostalgia, for proof. Proof that somewhere beneath the conditioning, there had been moments untouched by manipulation. Proof that happiness had existed before roles were assigned. I set the photo on the shelf, without the frame. My family didn't get to define it anymore. I did. Around sunset, my phone buzzed again, this time with a name that hit unexpectedly hard. Daniel, my boyfriend. The man who loved me, who meant well, who didn't understand the storm behind my silence. I unlocked the phone. Can we talk? Your mom called me today. A cold dread slid down my throat. I typed fast. What did she say? The dots blipped. She said she's worried about you, that you're shutting everyone out. She asked me to convince you to talk to them. I closed my eyes. Of course she did. Of course she went to the one person she thought could talk me into returning to the role she preferred. The agreeable daughter, the fixer, the peacemaker. Then came the line that pinched something sharp inside me. She said you're acting out of character, that Melissa would never treat her parents like this. Melissa, Daniel's ex-girlfriend. A woman my mother barely met once, yet she invoked her now, as a comparison, as leverage. My jaw clenched. I typed back, slowly, choosing each word like a boundary laid brick by brick. Daniel, I love you, but my mother involving you is manipulation, and bringing up Melissa is unacceptable. Please don't engage with them on my behalf again. A long pause. Then, I'm sorry, I didn't know what to say. I won't talk to them again. I'm here. However you need. Relief unwound inside me. Not total, but enough. I set the phone down and lit a candle in the kitchen, the soft flame casting a warm glow in the dim room. I inhaled the scent, lavender and sandalwood. Something gentle, something grounding, something mine. As I watched the flame sway, a truth settled into me. My family wasn't confused. They weren't hurt. They were destabilized, because I'd stopped performing the role they gave me. And now they were scrambling to force the script back into place. But the script was falling apart, and for once I wasn't. For the first time in years, a full week passed without a single message from my parents, Mark, or any of the extended family. Not a voicemail, not a text, not even one of those passive-aggressive forwarded inspirational quotes my mom liked to send when she was pretending to be reflective. At first, the silence felt sharp, like stepping into an empty room expecting noise and hearing nothing but the echo of your own breath. But as the days slipped by, the sharpness softened. It didn't feel like absence. It felt like air, like space, like finally being able to inhale without bracing for something heavy to drop. Silence wasn't punishment anymore. It was permission. Permission to exist without being monitored, molded, or managed. I spent the next morning organizing the living room. Not for guests, not for family, just for me. Books I actually loved filled the shelves. A thick, soft blanket I bought years ago, but kept too nice to use, finally unfolded across the couch. My sketchbook and pencils claimed a permanent spot on the coffee table. It felt like reclaiming territory I hadn't realized was mine. Around noon, sunlight spilled through the windows in warm ribbons. I opened the blinds wide, letting the brightness wash over the room. It made everything look different, alive, used, lived in. I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd opened those blinds fully. I used to keep them half closed, just in case Mom dropped by and didn't like the mess. She never dropped by, but her imagined opinions lived here anyway, until now. That afternoon, I made myself lunch. Something simple, but seasoned exactly the way I liked. Not bland to match my mother's preferences. Not rushed because Mark needed something. Just food that made me happy. I sat at the kitchen table and took a bite, then another. Slow, unhurried. And somewhere between tastes, a thought hit me. Peace has a flavor, and it tastes like choosing yourself. Around 3 p.m., I checked my email. Among work promotions and newsletters I never subscribed to was a new message from an address I recognized instantly, my mother's. Subject, family dinner. This Sunday, let's talk. There was no greeting, no apology, just a nostalgic paragraph about how life is short and people make mistakes, followed by a thinly veiled command. We all need to be at the table to heal. 6 p.m. Don't be late. My throat tightened, not with sadness, but with clarity. This wasn't an invitation. It wasn't even concern. It was strategy. The kind of message crafted to trigger guilt, to lure me back into the performance. I read it twice, then I archived it. Not delete, not reply. Just archive. The digital equivalent of shrugging. And that tiny act, my refusal to play along, felt monumental. Sunday arrived like any other day. I made coffee. I stretched my healing leg. I sketched a little. I opened the windows and let fresh air swirl through the apartment. At 6 p.m. sharp, the time my family dinner was supposed to be happening, I was sitting cross-legged on my couch, eating takeout Thai food and watching a documentary I'd been putting off for months. I didn't think about the dinner, not once, not even for curiosity. Halfway through my meal, I realized something stunning. I wasn't haunted by not being there. I wasn't bracing for backlash. I wasn't imagining their faces, their comments, their judgments. I was simply living. My phone stayed silent, and I didn't check it once. That was new. That was mine. Days passed, then a week, eventually 2. The silence continued, still deliberate, but losing its power. It faded into background noise, no more threatening than the hum of my refrigerator. During that time, I found little ways to reclaim more of myself. I moved furniture around. I reorganized my desk. I lit candles just because I liked the scent. I bought fresh flowers for my dining table and let them bloom without wondering whether my mother would criticize the color. Every small choice whispered, "This is your life now, yours to shape, yours to inhabit." I started journaling in the mornings. At first, the entries were raw, heavy, grief, anger, disbelief. But slowly they shifted. I feel lighter today. I laughed out loud and didn't feel guilty. I like the quiet. I feel like myself again. The shift wasn't dramatic. It was steady, rooted. One day, Rachel and I had a final check-in call. "You've done everything you asked me to help you with," she said. "Every boundary you set was honored. You're in control now." "Thanks for not pushing," I told her. "People think boundaries are walls," she replied, her voice gentle. "But they're actually doors. You decide who walks through them, and when." Her words settled into me, like truth I'd been waiting to hear my whole life. That evening, with the lights dimmed and soft music playing, I danced. No choreography, no audience, just a slow, free sway in my living room, my body moving in a space that finally felt like home. Later, I walked past a cafe I used to avoid. It was my mother's favorite, a place where she'd dissect everything wrong with me over tea. She'd critique my clothes, my career, my silence, my smile. Never enough, never right. I stepped inside anyway. I ordered a chai latte and sat by the window with a book. No ghosts, no shame, no old reflexes curling in my gut. The cafe hadn't changed, but I had. On the walk home, I passed a storefront window and caught a glimpse of myself. Not the bruised woman in a hospital gown. Not the background daughter in the family script. Not the quiet problem solver. Just me, whole, present, recognizable. I nodded at my reflection, not out of pride, but out of recognition. I knew that woman, and I liked her. 2 months later, the air shifted, spring warming into summer. My apartment looked lived in now. Plants thrived by the window. My reading corner was worn from use. Sketches filled the walls, imperfections and all. I had friends over for dinner, real friends, the kind who didn't measure what they'd get in return. I woke up lighter. I went to bed calmer. My days belonged to me. Then one morning I opened my mailbox and froze. A thin white envelope, no return address. Handwritten. I opened it. A birthday card. Signed simply, Mom, hope you're doing well. No apology, no accountability, no manipulation. Just 7 empty words. I stood in my quiet apartment, holding the card between my fingers. And I realized I wasn't angry, I wasn't waiting, I wasn't wishing. I simply put the card in a drawer, made myself dinner, seasoned it the way I liked, and watched the sunset from my balcony. Not to prove anything, but because I finally understood something. Healing isn't loud. It's a quiet choice you make over and over. To stay, to breathe, to keep choosing yourself even when no one else does. I didn't leave my family. I stopped begging them to see me. And for the first time in my life, I was enough.